And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. There's a fascinating bit of research that the CDD launched just yesterday, which is causing a bit of a stir. And we're going to look into that because whilst we've been talking about e-levy and the economy and everything else, there was in the background still one of the biggest controversial issues of the last parliament, or the parliament before the recess that's last year, the anti-LGBTQ plus bill, which is still, by the way, being considered. We all seem to have forgotten about it, but it's still there. And remember, the biggest conversation now in Ghana today is about the economy. And we're learning from this CDD research that apparently the anti-LGBTQ plus bill that the parliament is considering will have devastating consequences on the already, reeling economy reeling from the pangs and claws of COVID-19 if we dare pass it. And we're going to be getting into that because I want you to pay attention to what the CDD is finding. But after that, we'll get to interrogate it. Here, we'll get through the research and then we'll try and present to you what the facts really say. And then you can make your own conclusion. Because, like it or not, Parliament's committees make a proposal and the Parliament will have to take a decision. We have to consider all these facts before that bill is passed. And this CDD work is a very important part of that consideration. And so let's look at what it says. Now, according to this research, the bill is going to be a source of disorder instead of order. But pay attention to some of the key things that you also find. That diplomatic tensions could also affect Ghana's heavy reliance on external financing and grants. And yesterday, I drew for you how this country is heavily reliant on borrowed money. If you take borrowed money out of the equation, if you take revenues that we make out of the equation, you'll be left with grants, right? And financing. You'll be left with grants and financing, which is a very important part of what we need to run this economy. And what the CDD research is saying is this could be affected. If this is affected, well, you begin to see the impact. I'll show you a graph that the Joy Research Desk pulled as part of this analysis to try and make the point. But that will tell a different story. We'll come to that. And the CDD is also saying that there could be reputational damage, mostly from Western world, where Ghana has significant dependence on, and that is fundamentally very true. So those are the things that they find. But they also find that there could also be a source of conflict, major source of conflict when it comes to the bill. And they identified these three major sources of conflict if we pass this bill. The first is personality conflicts. The second is legal conflicts. And then there's the characterizations of the LGBTQ issues that they mentioned. So you see some of the personality clashes here in terms of what our former presidents, the positions that they've held on this matter, and how that clashes with some other groups in this country. That is one of the potential areas of conflict that they identified. And then I guess most importantly for me is the legal conflict that they talk about. For example, they talk about the bill making a case that the view of the National House of Chiefs cannot be glossed over because it is creation of the 1992 Constitution. But the state regulation of sexual behaviors are also founded on the principle that certain sexual expression are inimical to the public health and public morality, right? And it makes reference to SDG Goal 10, 5, and 3, and believes the provisions aligns with SDGs as well, okay? So you begin to see some interesting issues emerging. The research says, according to CDD's research, the bill could be a major source of diplomatic tension between Ghana and the UN and the United UN Human Rights Council, used as a weak point against Ghana, which could quickly descend into economic pain. Well, so we've seen in the past, and this is not far from the fact, because we saw under David Cameron that Britain, United Kingdom, was explicit that they will be sanctioning countries like Ghana if we do not legalize homosexuality. And it took the former president, may he so rest in perfect peace, President Tamil Sistani, says, well, you can threaten us with all the economic pain all you want. We are standing our ground. And so this is very possible. And if you go to countries like the US, where you have a president who is very, very pro-gay and in terms of their outlook, aid could now become an issue in terms of tying that to some conditionalities when it comes to this very subject. Also, the CDD says dwindle Ghana's economic fortunes abroad, which is key at a time when our credit ratings is taking a hit, at the time when we can't borrow from the Eurobond market, etc., etc. There actually could be potential investors in Ghana's economy who will say, I will no longer lend money to Ghana because Ghana is passing a law that is going to criminalize homosexuality. That is a possibility. That's, in essence, what the CDD is pointing us to in the research that they've done. Now, there are some direct impacts that they've also outlined for us to pay attention to. Budgetary allocation could be a difficulty that the CDD points out. Now, we have also the key issues about international principles. But I want you to pay attention to this principle here called the Equator Principle. And it's a very fascinating one that I guess I haven't had part of this equation in the conversation, but it's important. The CDD is pointing us to that because financial institutions and their clients have a responsibility to respect human rights. That's one. The CDD points that out. And that the bill could lead to higher cost of projects financed by these international financial institutions under the Equator Principles where red flags are going to be raised. So there's going to be a cost attached to this. And for a country that is so heavily reliant on other people other than ourselves, you see why that could be an issue, right? That's the CDD's point of view here. Now, according to the CDD's likely socio-economic impact of this is very obvious. Now, pay attention to right now coming to some of the numbers here. They say Ghana's budget regularly relies on grants of about 4 to 6%, right? CDD's argument is this could take a hit. This could take a hit. And if it takes a hit, they believe it will affect us. But is that really the case? Is that what the evidence really suggests? We went a bit out of what the research says to try and find evidence of this. Let's look at what we indeed find. Now, this table here that my researchers pulled out for me, and they did this so that we can appreciate the challenge that the CDD is pointing out and put it in context. This is a World Bank data that is giving you a sense of the socio-economic impact, but also telling you this is a table showing you the revenues that we get, right? If you take away grants from it, this is what you'll be left with, right? If you take away grants, technical support, etc., if you quantify all that, and you take that away from everything else that we make as a country, this is where we are in terms of the graph in terms of what we've done over the years. So this is historical analysis of this. So you have this in billion. So if you go to 2002, we're at 18 billion. If you take away grants, technical support, and everything else that is coming in, we are at 18 billion. But if you come to 2019, right, you see a certain sharp decline because we are seeing that the financing from grants, etc., are beginning to dwindle. I want to show you something that even proves that even more, because if you draw the line here, this, by the way, is the grants received by Ghana, excluding technical support. And if you see the line here, the line graph tells you that, and this is where I guess it poses a challenge to the CDD's research, because the grants received by Ghana over the period is trending downwards, right? It's at its lowest point. The last time the data was available that we could find was 2019, which is just in the region of 4 million cedis. It's not even a billion, right? So it's trending significantly downwards. But Ghanaian economy has done fairly okay. In other words, we are surviving with less and less grants and donor support. That is the reality, right? Middle income status, lower middle income status, whatever that is, it's impacting on the availability of these grants. And this graph doesn't tell a lie, right? As the research shows. But so if you believe that this is the case, which the facts suggest it is, and we are surviving without the grants, can the argument be sustained that if indeed we are going to be losing these grants because of LGBTQ, Ghana's economy will suffer that much? Because we're already doing significantly without it already, right? I mean, so that's a question that the CDD will have to answer. I'll put it to them so that they can address that. I mean, so in other words, the question is, so yeah, why should we even care? Because we're already they're giving us less anyway. So if they don't give us at all, we can hold our own. We will put that to the CDD very shortly. And they've made some recommendations. And one of the key recommendations that they've made is that the government should conduct a cost-benefit analysis of the bill to avoid the potential reputational, economic, and diplomatic friction, right? So government should do that before we pass this, because we could take a hit as a result of that. Well, my guests are joining me. Very interesting research indeed. But you've seen what also the data shows about grants, right? If you are focusing on that. Economic implications is something that we cannot ignore. But is that really going to impact us in any significant form or fashion? My guests will be answering that question right after this. They're seated very shortly. And thank you very much for staying with us here on PM Versus. My guest, Dr. Theophilus Champon. He is economist, political risk analyst, of course, part of the researchers who did this work for the CDD, joins us via Zoom. Sam George is a deputy ranking member on the Communications Committee, of course, a key sponsor of the bill, and I guess the poster boy, indeed, for the bill. And joins me in the studio. We're expecting to be joined shortly by Moses Fuamweni. He's an executive secretary, National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values. And then Bernard Anaba, who of course was a lead researcher, and he was the face of the research when it was launched by the CDD yesterday. I want to come straight to you, Dr. Theophilus Champon, to that last point I raised in my presentation, which is that I get the sense from the analysis and the research that you've done that if you did a cost-benefit analysis, we possibly will arrive at the conclusion that this will not make sound economic sense, not only economic sense, socio-economic, political, etc. sense, but with the economics, standing as one of the key pillars, will not make economic sense if we pass it. Would that be a fair conclusion to reach based on everything else that we know your research revealed?
So good evening. And just to clarify, I wasn't part of the team that did the research. I was actually a discussant at the forum that was organized by CDD yesterday, because I think that's an important distinction to make.
It is. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, and again, of course, not here to discuss morality, but to discuss the economics. You make a couple of interesting points on the potential economic impact of this bill. And in my remarks that I made yesterday in discussing the research, I sort of highlighted three, areas. One of which is the use of the threat of withdrawal of aid and grants against Ghana. And as the data actually shows, and as I did indicate yesterday, I don't really think that would make much of an impact at the macro level. So if you look at the net official overseas development assistance, so ODA, that we receive as a country, in the early 2000s, this used to be about 45% of our total budget. But as of the last data point in 2019, it's only $936 million, or 1.3% of the country's, GDP. And if you were to isolate even just the grant component of it, grants over the period from 2012 to 2020 only averaged 1.27 billion Ghana cedis, or just under $200 million. So you can actually see that in the grand sense of the word, Ghana is already sort of beyond aid in that sense. And so the threat of withdrawal of grants, even if that materializes at the macro level, may not make much of an impact as the data points that you showed indicate. So, the picture here is that Ghana is not Malawi or Uganda. So again, let me give you another data point to just characterize that. Again, if you look at the same ODA, the Overseas Development Assistance, as a percentage of the central government expense or expenditure, in Ghana's case, that's about 7.8%. In Malawi's case, it's about 74%, right? And in Uganda's case, is about 44%. So you can see, comparatively speaking, the aid and grant portion or component of our budget is really not much or that significant anyway. However, you can actually also then look at a potential impact, and I use the word advisedly, at a sectoral level. So at the aggregate macro level, you don't see much of an impact. But at the sectoral level, in the three social sectors, education, health, and social protection, you do have some significant portion of their budgets being financed by donor partners. So I'll give you education as an example. In the education budget, 95% of it comes from government of Ghana, out of which 65% goes to pay salary or employee compensation. And then you have about 5% coming from donor partners. But interestingly, these 5% goes to finance other critical reform programs, such as the digitalization of school inspections, or setting up the inspectorate board, or looking at things around primary level assessment, measurement, and outcome. So if that threat sort of materializes, although you would not see an impact at a macro level, at a sectoral level, you could possibly see some sort of impact. And then there are two other quick ones I'll just highlight and pass the conversation on. We also maybe could see some possible impact, or the argument has been made that we may see some possible impact on the country's investment environment. But like I also said, investors look at a range of factors, and therefore the passage of the bill, if it does come to pass, I don't necessarily think is what would curtail or prevent certain investors from coming into the countries. The area where you might see some impact, but we don't have enough data points on, is around tourism, inflows. And I say this because, in recent years, Ghana has been branding itself as the place for tourists to come to. We've been seeing major festivals like Afrochella and Year of Return and things like that. And even the numbers indicate that we had 1.1 million people visiting the country in 2019. On an average, or the average tourist will spend about $2,931 within the period of their stay. So if we do pass this bill and it sends sort of the wrong signal, then perhaps there is the potential that we may see some short-term impact on tourist inflows.
But just for a quick one,
enough at the moment.
So overall, then, would it be accurate to say that we can safely discount the economic implications as a real threat to us if we pass this? Yes or no? What would you say, very briefly?
So you can discount it at an aggregate or at the macro level, but you cannot discount it at the micro level. And the micro level also, one other aspect would be, if you pass the law, then it is then likely that you're actually going to push certain people who affiliate as being LGBTQI from participating in the labor force, right? And therefore, you may see some impact of that, for example, in lower productivity or lower output as a result of like employment discrimination. And this ultimately has an impact or a constraint on your labor, supply.
I want to bring in
human capital investment.
Yeah, Doc, stay with me. I want to bring in Mr. Anaba, who was a lead researcher with this, and he was presented the findings that as they did. Mr. Anaba, thank you for your time on PM Express. You with me?
Yeah, thank you very much, Stevens.
Okay, great. So, we've just heard my own presentation and Dr. Choi Champo's presentation. There are factors that we haven't measured yet. So they talk about the effect on the labor productivity, effect on tourism. We haven't measured. But there are factors that we know for certain because they are real numbers to back, which I showed in the graph. And you mentioned as a direct factor. And you say Ghana's budget regularly relies on grants of about 4 to 6% each year from the DPs. development partners. They and the international community are mostly against this bill. This could result in delays and reductions in these budgetary support. We just showed real numerical evidence that as far as grants are concerned, Ghana is actually surviving with very little or no grants at all now, as a trend show. In fact, the last data point was 2019, which I showed. If you track it all the way to 2021, you see it's even less than that, which means that this particular conclusion that you put in there cannot be supported by the fact that it may be such a significant impact that Ghana should possibly take a second look at the passing the bill. What's your reaction to that?
Thank you very much. And yes, so it's an issue of whether it is significant or not significant. And some of these data points change over time. But what we are saying is that in any case, there is some support that comes through donor support to our budget. And over the years, it has been around that figure. That's 4 to 6%. Maybe it has been there, as you said. And when you look at other aspects in terms of, as you said, direct impact, there are others in terms of the labor force and other issues that we haven't accurately measured yet. So all that, we really do not know exact figures, and even that is why I said we probably will need a better measure in terms of doing a cost-benefit analysis. This has been just a deck study on what the figures are now, but definitely there is a cost that we are going to face. As to whether it's significant or not, it is something that we'll still have to consider. Okay,
stay with me. Some judges with me. So let's start with that economic question. And I start with that deliberately because of the times you're in. Because we're in an economic crisis, right? And, Fitch's, everybody, Moody's, everybody's hitting us. And so that will jump at anybody who likes it. What's your own reaction to the potential impact for this Ghanaian economy if you get your way and the bill is passed?
Very good evening to our viewers, to yourself and to my co-panelist. I think that the point must be made that your graph settles this matter, and figures don't lie. The impact to Ghana is going to be negligible to non-existent, because, I mean, at the end of the day, even when you look at the areas that Dr. Tio Champon spoke about in terms of education, for example, Ghana is in a position we introduced the free senior high school program, which actually cost us more than the 5% that donor funding gives to things like the Inspectorate Board. Okay, and so clearly we can fund our education 100% if we choose to. And that is even without taking into consideration proper prudent use of the resources that we have. When we talk about tourism and a negative effect on tourism, for example, that's something that I would again challenge with empirical evidence, because except anyone is going to suggest that the boom in tourism in Ghana is a sex-driven tourism. It's a same-sex as LGBTQ sex tourism that we're having in Ghana. Most of the people who come to Ghana for Afrochella and all the concerts that we have come here because of the music and the ambience that we have.
I guess the point is some people in the West might dissociate themselves and might not come because it's a country that is anti-gay and criminalized.
A lot of people travel to Dubai as a holiday destination. Dubai has a lot more tourists than Ghana. Dubai, you can't even kiss as a straight couple. A man cannot kiss his wife in public.
But it's the world's hottest tourism destination.
Absolutely. So, I mean, people, because at the end of the day, whatever your sexual proclivities are supposed to happen in the confines of your room, outside of the tourist reasons why you came here. You wouldn't go and be expressing your sexual proclivities at the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum or at the Independence Square. You'll be doing that in the privacy of your bedroom. And so this whole talk about it having an effect on our tourism, again, is largely perception, but not reality. Because like I said, the evidence exists. Look at what's happening in Dubai, for example, as a tourist destination. Again, when people talk about the effect that this is going to have, and that Dr. Tio Champon made a very important point that I think that I want to address about discrimination in the job space and market space. Again, it is criminal for anybody to try to determine as part of HR policy the sexuality or gender preference of anybody. I mean, and that's not what this bill is about. This bill is not asking that HR persons should ask people when they go for a job, what is your sexual or gender preference?
The law of unintended consequences. If there's a law that criminalizes it, don't you think to empower those who openly do this?
Except when you're coming to an interview at multimedia, you come emblazoned in LGBTQ colors and come dressed in a way that suggests that you're a member of that community. But if you dress professionally, like any other worker who has come for that interview, how would they know what your sexual orientation is? You understand me? And you see, yesterday when we spoke on Top Story, I said it's important that we make the distinction between sex and gender. What the bill is dealing with is not sex. The Constitution and all the international conventions are explicit, and I support that position, that discrimination on the basis of sex is illegal. However, what the bill is doing is not dealing with sex. What the bill is doing is dealing with gender identifications. Sex is a biological construct, male, female, intersex. Gender is a social construct, straight, gay, and now we have, at the last count, 49 expressions of gender identity. Now, what we are dealing with is with the gender, and nowhere in any of these international documents, be the UN Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Cultural, and Social Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, none of these charters mentions gender as a basis on which you cannot discriminate. In fact, those charters actually state that the state must take cogent steps to protect society and what society deems as normal. So when the assumption is made that there's going to be an attack on the economy of Ghana, please, I mean, let's have a discussion of apples when we are talking about apples, and a discussion of oranges when we are talking about oranges. The attempt to befuddle the issues, and like I said yesterday to Dr. Mr. I don't know,
Anaba.
Is he a doctor? Is it Dr. Anaba?
Anaba.
Dr. Anaba, with the greatest respect, that the biggest threat, economic threat, is to civil society organizations like the ones that he represents and the CGD. Because a large chunk of their funding comes from such organizations. Yes, he made a point. Government takes funding from those organizations as well. Yes, but our presidents have made it clear to those organizations that aid or support from them that is linked with something that is against our social construct will not be accepted. Professor Mills made that point. President Mahama made that point. President Kufuor made that point. President Akufo-Addo has reiterated that point. So at the end of the day, we've made it clear. Aid with strings, then tomorrow, if a group comes in and says that the aid they are giving to us, we must allow for the rights of persons who have engaged in violent crime, but because they support the expression of violent crime as an expression of religion. And so we must also accept that. Yesterday, he spoke about principles, and I hit on that point. What are the principles of this state and of this country? And you see, when I spoke about the conventions, for example, I will just read briefly the African Charter, because that's very critical. The African Charter, in Article 17.3, says that, in fact, let me start from 17.1. Every individual shall have the right to education. 17.2, every individual may freely take part in the cultural life of his community. But in 17.3, this is what they said: the promotion and protection of morals and traditional values recognized by the community, not by the individual, by the community, shall be the duty of the state. In 18, it says the family shall be the natural unit and basis of society. It shall be protected by the state, which shall take care of its physical health and moral. In 2, it says the state shall have the duty to assist the family, which is the custodian of morals and traditional values recognized by the community, not by the individual. So when people keep talking about individual liberties and saying that Ghana has ratified international conventions, the conventions are talking about community. Again, even when you go, and you see, it is important that there are several of these conventions. I mean, I can give you the UN's own document. When you take Article 2 of the UN Human Rights Declaration, like I stated, it sets out the basis for which you cannot discriminate. In there nowhere is gender. Okay, when you take the international covenant on economic and political rights, this is what it says: freedom in 18.3, Article 18.3, freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, or morals, or the fundamental rights and freedom of others. In this country, the CDD itself did its own research and said 93% of Ghanaians are opposed to the social construct of homosexuality as an acceptable way of life, community. So, on the basis of principles, how then do you say that we should set aside the principles of a state? And a state is an aggregation of the beliefs of the individuals in there. And so if the aggregation of the majority of the aggregation of people within the territorial jurisdiction called Ghana find it abhorrent to have a certain practice or a certain way of life, how then do we say we should set that aside?
So you're not convinced by the economic implications?
There are no economic implications.
Let me put that to Bernard Anaba. Bernard, there's a part of the conclusion that you reach, which, and I want to quote this to you. You say, the resultant indirect cost to the economy as a result of possible diplomatic tension, reduced or delayed grants, and reputational damage, mostly from Western world, where Ghana has significant dependence, would be huge. Not could, would be. So that's a definite conclusion. I mean, would you admit this conclusion is a gross overstatement? It's downright an exaggeration?
Sorry, Evans, I'm not a doctor, I'm a mister. Just to correct that, yes. If I look at the bill and the kind of personalities involved, we will mention former President Tamils, and we have John Paul, as well as a current president being against the bill. We have other very important international personalities, such as the UN Human Rights Commissioner and other rapporteurs. They have all been on opposing sides, and as I said, this will mean that there's going to be a significant kind of contest or division in terms of how human rights is implemented. And what it will mean that anytime Ghana is going to have any kind of conversation, this will always be on the table. We may not have the figure to measure the exact distance, but that is why I said indirect. That will have an impact in terms of what it will mean that if any discussion is going to be delayed, any important discussion for the nation is going to be delayed because somebody is demanding that you attend to human rights issues, or even not giving you the opportunity to come around the table to discuss issues because they think that your country is not human rights compliant and all that. So all those things will have huge impact on our country. As I said, they are indirect. We don't have the measure, but looking at the kind of the scale of the problem and the kind of personalities involved, it means that it will be significant.
No, I mean, but that's what we need to interrogate. I mean, because this is a research piece, and so it has to be scrutinized a bit. When you conclude would be huge, but you admit you can't measure, I mean, that creates a problem, it does not.
Well, yeah, I can admit that, but looking at it from one point of view, I can see something that is quite significant, and that's how I saw it.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Tuer Champon. Doc, there are other aspects of this, but I mean, let me ask you a fundamental question. You've seen the document. We'll come to the issues of social disorder and conflict of the law shortly. Are you convinced by the research as it relates to the warning to us, in essence, that we should reconsider this? If this research is all you're looking at, would you be convinced to pull brakes on the bill?
In discussing this, I highlighted that we actually need a bit more data points to substantiate a number of the points that had been made. But I think the core point really about the threat of withdrawal of donor aid and grants, the data already shows that we are already somewhat at the beyond aid trajectory. And so the likely impact perhaps may not be as big as being anticipated. And this is where I think Sam's point becomes interesting, in the sense that if at a sectoral level we would see some potential impact, and I use the word potential because it's not been quantified yet, then what really that means is that as a country, we need to be able to finance our own development or find the monies from somewhere to meet, right, those funding gaps or shortfall. And even if we were to decide to go to the market to borrow, as we've been doing recently with Eurobonds and things like that, I don't necessarily think that, the investors or the market players would punish Ghana just on the basis of the passage of, this bill in that sense of the word. I mean, the point about the reputational damage is also an interesting one, but it comes down really to the geopolitics and the dynamics. So I said, unlike, say, Malawi or Uganda that relies much more heavily on donor financing for their budget, that's not the case for Ghana. And in that sense of the word, I think perhaps we have a bit of leverage to within the economic sort of argument or the economic space. So coming back or sort of wrapping it up, I think we need more data points, and I made this very clear yesterday. And part of the conclusions of the report also clearly articulated that we need to do more cost-benefit analysis to actually get to sort of a more objective basis of an assessment.
Yeah, I mean, Banana, but let's broaden this. Another area that you settled on, which I'm interested in, is that this bill could be a source of social disorder. Explain that.
Yes, it was this point is based on the fact that the bill actually, if you pass a law or you intend to actually bring about more order in terms of, if you listen to what Pam Joe says, that about 93% or more of Ghanaians do not support gay rights. Eventually, you want to have an economic or a political system that is of peaceful, or the people are able to go about their businesses and doing their work without any malice or without any kind of interference. But in this case, like we said earlier on, you're going to drive a lot of other people who identify as maybe gay persons or lesbians, whatever, into the underground economy. They are going to have significant problems in terms of employment, their social life, and other things. It also means that, like I said, where the significant personalities are disagreeing on certain provisions of the bill or the whole idea of the human rights issue. So that is not a good thing. That is a kind of social disorder directly to those who are going to be affected, and also for the fact that we are not going to see eye to eye in terms of human rights issues with the UN and other things. It's also the problem.
I mean, Sam, what's your reaction to that?
Well, social disorder and the fact that the majority of Ghanaians do not agree with some persons engaged in sexual orientations that the majority find should not be a cause of worry. The larger proportion of Ghanaians as well find armed robbery abhorrent, and that has not created social disorder. A larger proportion of Ghanaians find prostitution abhorrent. It has not created social disorder. A larger proportion of Ghanaians find people with extreme religious views abhorrent. It has not created social disorder, so this will not create social disorder. Like I keep saying, I mean, this is really, listening to Mr. Anaba with the greatest of respect, he comes across as a doomsday prophet on this with the greatest of respect. I mean, he makes it sound as though once we pass this is the end of Ghana. But look, and Theo made a point that you're looking at the cost of us having to absorb things that hitherto were funded by these international organizations. And that is even with a proviso that they will withdraw all aid. That in itself is not a certainty. But even for the purposes of this conversation, let's even assume that they withdraw all aid. I think that civil society players like Mr. Naba and Co. and CDD should be focusing more on how government will be more prudent in the use of our natural revenue from our natural resources. The wastage in our system, if we actually put the waste in our system, if we cut 50%, not even totally, just 50% of the waste in our system, we would not need the $1 billion worth of, under $1 billion worth of aid and grants that we got in 2019. In fact, the Auditor General points that in 2020 we lost 12 billion Ghana cedis. That is $2 billion. So that's why I said even if we saved half of that 12 billion, which is 6 billion, we do not need any. Ghana could have run its budget with zero aid from the international organizations. And look, I mean, the CDD and ISODEC should be calling out the likes of the majority leader, Oseche Mensah Bonsu, who at the height of Ghanaians' agitation against the e-levy, celebrates his birthday with an e-levy cake. Such insensitivity. And when he's called out for it, he says that it was somebody in the minority. I dare Oseche Mensah Bonsu, if he has any integrity left in him.
You know this for certain.
And I said, I am daring Oseche Mensah Bonsu. I said, if I am daring him, if he has any integrity left, he should mention the MP who sent it to him.
So you're saying that he got a
that cake was done by himself. It is the insensitivity of those in power, the haughtiness and arrogance of those in power. They think they can do whatever they want. I am saying, listen,
I mean,
who sent the cake to him?
Take it.
I say I am daring him.
As a light-hearted, you know.
I am daring Mensah Bonsu. He is someone who doesn't like to be challenged at all, and I am daring him. If he has any integrity, he should mention the NDC MP who sent it to him. We weren't even invited to the party. If he says it was...
Is that why you're upset?
Oh, no. But, I mean, we are more interested in demonstrating tomorrow against the e-levy. But the point I'm making is, even if it was a gift that he did not agree with, why did he gleefully stand there and cut the cake? Who put out the pictures? Those were official pictures put out by him. When his own party base turned on him, because even the MPP foot soldiers know that they will feel the pinch of the e-levy because of the waste in the system. You are bringing in an e-levy. When they turn the waste on him, then they come up with this impotent lie that it is an NDC MP. Like I said, I'm repeating it again. Honorable Oseche Mensah Bonsu, MP for Swami. I'm looking you in the face through the camera. Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and leader of government business. I dare you to name the NDC MP who sent you the cake. If you can't name it in 24 hours, the whole country will know you are a liar. I mean, so look, we need to call the people who hold the account of state.
Honestly, I mean, I haven't heard him give that excuse. You heard him say,
well, it's been put out by Kennedy Osenyako, who is the ranking member on roads. And that is the official government position that is being put out. So he should come out and say Kennedy Osenyako is lying.
Okay, well, that's not the...
No, it is. It is one of the key things.
But it's linked.
If at a time that our economy is struggling, and people do not understand why you want to impose further hardship, you want to impose an e-levy tax on them, and if we did not make noise on it, you had already allocated $40 million. I'm sure the cost to our education sector, the support, may not be up to $40 million. So they had allocated $40 million to a company of theirs to take the e-levy. It is this we must be holding them accountable for.
Let's come back to the issues that we're talking about. Now, in the realm of the scheme of things of what you were saying there, one of the things that Ms. Anaba also touched on in his analysis in that document was you were just talking about where we are now, we're struggling, right?
Yes.
And so we need to be doing the right things to save money, right? And not dissipate our...
Absolutely.
The point that they also touched on is, if you pass this bill, we're going to spend a lot of resources enforcing it. A lot of resources, because in the bill, you've actually made provision for some support for people with, LGBT people in the community. That definitely, they point that out. That definitely is one of the areas that you can do without. As a country, why should that be a priority for a country that you just identified eloquently in the midst of an economic crisis? Why should we be focusing on that? There will be huge economic cost to us.
The support that is stated for in the bill is not from the state. And you see, I've heard this from the academics and from CDD and co.
But from where?
Oh, first and foremost, if a policeman is supposed to go and effect an arrest on someone who is accused under the bill if it becomes law, why are we going to recruit new policemen? It's an existing police officer who already earns a salary, who will be called if there was an armed robbery, or who will be called if there was a fire, or if there was an accident. It is the same salary he's earning. So you are not recruiting new police officers. If the person goes to court, it is the same attorneys at the Attorney General's department who will form the prosecution. It is the same judges who are already earning a salary who will sit on the case. We are not building new courtrooms, so there is no additional cost. Again, already there are medical and pseudo-medical service providers who offer services to persons in that community as we speak. So what the bill is doing to say is that all of these persons will come under the ambit of the Ministry of Health. So in fact, we are insisting that these persons who today are operating without any proper regulation of that space, we are bringing them under the regulation of HEFRA, the Health Facilities Regulatory Authority. They will actually be paying now to the state. The state will make money. Look, if anybody is going to, if we do not pass this bill and we allow LGBTQ become a thing, a norm, the cost to the state. Let me not even talk about the health cost, the economic cost to businesses. Do you realize that multimedia would have to reconfigure your building?
Yeah.
Because now you, apart from your male and female toilets, you have to create one for those who are gender fluid.
No, but that is definitely
that is cost. No, if we do not stop this and it becomes the norm, and now people come in here and say,
interject a little bit on that.
Yes, please do.
On the economic cost argument, I have had chance to look at a lot of the published work within the academic literature, not in Ghana, in other jurisdictions, and actually in places where they have implemented some of these, more inclusive type policies. The net economic benefit after a period of time, however they measured it, is actually positive. So I just think it's a point to clarify there. So it does come with cost, and I fully support some on that point. But over a longer period of time, when you look at the evidence base from the published work, you do see some evidence that actually indicates that the economic benefit, right, is net positive. But I just thought I put in that.
Well, I would love to jump in and ask Theo, what economic benefits are come out of being inclusive, as you put it, of diversity? What are the positives?
So inclusiveness or diversity in the workplace would actually translate into improved, and here I'm talking about improved financial outcomes for the firm, and the data clearly supports this. So I can make or give some references to some published work to you after this work as well. One of the works that I found, which was published just recently in March of 2021, looked at how the market perception of state-level same-sex marriage legalization impacted certain firms or reactions to firms headquartered in a particular state. And the state, we find, and I quote this, positive market reactions to firms headquartered in states that legally recognize marriage equality. Further, we find that the market views companies more favorably in one, first mover states before the Supreme Court ruling of United States versus Windsor, and two, states that have stronger anti-discrimination laws for the LGBT community. So, I mean, this is from the published work, but I think it's quite important that we situate the analysis within the sort of right context.
Yeah, so putting in the right context, I would suggest that a lot of that work is pro-LGBTQ propaganda that's put out there. Because when you look at the real cost, when you look at the real cost, when you go to places like Europe, Theo, where they have tried to push diversity or inclusivity over 20 to 30 years, they're having a problem with their workforce, where they have an aging workforce, because this is beginning to take a toll on their reproductive rates. Their reproductive rates have fallen below 1%. And so now they're having to look for active workforce from outside the countries.
There was nothing necessarily, because you need to be able to establish the counterfactual, which is with or without the passage of these LGBT type legislations in Europe or say in America, would the reproduction rate naturally have fallen? That's the counterfactual that you need to establish. So I just struggle a little bit to accept that argument. But like I said, I just think it's important that we look at it. If we're making the cost argument within the full life cycle, and not just look at it from a narrow perspective.
Well, I struggle to see how having a man who dresses as a woman and wears a high heel to the newsroom of Joy FM will make you more productive. Because that's the suggestion, that having inclusivity improves productivity in a business.
But it does should naturally lead to that. If you are inclusive.
How?
If you're inclusive.
How? Are you saying that men who come here as men are less productive than men who come here dressed as women?
But he's just pointed you to empirical evidence that suggests.
And I'm telling you that a lot of that work put out is, look, the LGBTQ cabal is extremely intentional.
That's conspiracy theory.
It's not conspiracy theory. They actually have think tanks that are pushing out this documentation. And look, even with all of what we are discussing here, is it not a think tank that has put this out? Where is it coming from?
But that's what think tanks do.
A think tank that is funded by organizations that support LGBT.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I have not said there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. If you have an Islamic organization sponsoring you, you will not hold a party and have a pork kebab there.
Okay, so let me get Mr. Anaba, who did that research, very quickly on this as we begin to wrap up. So the research, I mean, you've talked about the points there. So what's the end game here for you? With now that you put us together, what's the end game? What do you think government should do and the MPs should do with this?
Well, thank you very much. And just to come back on what Honorable Sam George is saying, initially he said that the bill is not about asking each child to access to what their gender or sex, whatever it is, for employed and all that. And Sam George is tuning all sorts of ill motives, this study. CDD, ISOTEC, and other CS organizations that receive funding. So that you are talking about a bill having to criminalize advocacy for LGBTQ activities. And a study like this, already you're impugning us to be a pro-LGBTQ, which means that we probably wouldn't have had this conversation if this bill was passed. So it's kind of trying to stifle kind of discussion, stifle conversation, stifle people's intellect, and it's also impugning that people, LGBTQ perhaps do not contribute that much in terms of their value to the economy. I think that is not right. We cannot dispute, we cannot say that people do not contribute because they are of certain sexual orientation or what.
Okay. Mr. Anaba, thank you very much. And very quickly, on this Seche Mensah matter, he hasn't spoken anywhere. As is being reported, there's a Facebook post that is purported to be coming from Honorable Candidate Osei Nyako, who is the chair of the Transport Committee, who had suggested that the cake had come from the opponents as part of the strategy, and they brought it. It says, so your intention of surprising your own colleague at the tail end of the party with such a cake in your party color was to set him up and government against the Ghanaian people. Politics is deviant, so never trust anyone, not even the one you are with in the same party. So that wasn't a categorical that it came from your end.
No, but what he just said is from your political opponent.
Yeah,
what you read.
Yes.
And I'm daring
it could be
them.
PNC. It could be PNC.
I am daring them.
It could be PNC.
I am daring them. And I said I am daring them to name whichever party.
So when you dare Chambers Abonsu, I mean, he hasn't said anything. I mean,
he should come out and disassociate himself.
No, but this man too.
Was it not his birthday?
From what I read,
was he not the one who
hasn't categorically said NDC?
Was he not the one who cut the cake?
Enjoy the rest of your evening.